Welcome to Lost in the Woods, a 15-day countdown to the worldwide release of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. In this series, I'm dissecting one game from the Zelda franchise every day with the goal of separating the core Zelda game elements from the fluff. I'll show you how Breath of the Wild is the culmination of 30 years worth of Nintendo defining, losing, rediscovering, and finally perfecting exactly what makes a Zelda game great. Not even a full year after The Legend of Zelda was released, Nintendo had already pumped out the first sequel in the Zelda franchise, Zelda 2: Adventure of Link. At first glance, it's a completely different game. The combat aspect of the game has been ripped out of the overhead map, reworked into a side-scrolling Mario-inspired combat, which seems like an odd choice, considering Miyamoto's deliberate focus on making sure Zelda was not inspired by Mario. In his own words, "We started to work on The Legend of Zelda at the same time as Super Mario Bros. And since the same teams did both games, we tried to separate the different ideas. Super Mario Bros. Should be linear. The Legend of Zelda should be the total opposite." So, what happened? Why such a dramatic shift in focus? Well, with Nintendo growing rapidly, Zelda 2 was handed off to another team, and while Miyamoto was part of the initial design, apparently the new team didn't have the same goals. But aside from the gameplay controls and aesthetics, they held onto a lot of the same concepts. Just like Zelda 1, Zelda 2 is still made up from the building blocks of combat, adventure, and exploration. The biggest change wasn't in what they included though, but rather that it was given a different focus. In this game, they prioritized combat over exploration. Let's take a look at how everything important in Zelda 2 supports the combat core. To add more strategy to the swordplay, they added vertical height to the sword jabs. They also added jumping, and the ability to pair jumping with that iconic downward stab popularized by Smash Bros. And they also added the ability to cast magic without the need for a special kind of weapon, like a staff or something similar. Once the combat system was designed, they needed to build levels that could take advantage of it from a side-scrolling perspective, hence the Castlevania-style platforms, palaces, and jumpy verticality to the enemies. And to be honest, this approach worked great in making the game more immediately accessible, but not really in the accessible to anybody sort of way. The combat core made Zelda 2 more familiar to the hardcore audience due to the arcade-style combat. Ironically, due to the nature of the combat and platforming, it's now considered the most punishingly inaccessible game in the franchise. Don't let me give you the wrong impression though. The combat was properly innovative. In-depth combat becomes an important core with the later games. But the combat is not what made the original Zelda game great. Where's the anticipation of hiking through the woods around Miyamoto's home and discovering a lake? Zelda 2 is a fun game, for sure, but it lost the magic of discovery and adventure through non-linear exploration. Miyamoto put it best when he said that he saw A Link to the Past as the real sequel to Legend of Zelda, which is tomorrow's game. We'll take a look at their real sequel, the sequel that linked back to their past. The game where they managed to step away from the core of non-linear exploration even as they managed to perfect the first game's formula.